Okay, we're going to wait a minute to let everybody arrive into our Zoom room, and then we will jump on in. Sazia, do we have everybody in that was in the waiting room?
Yeah, we have some people joining in, but I'll keep adding them as we go.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Jeff, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to welcome you on behalf of Milwaukee County and our project team, Milwaukee County DOT, from the director's office. We do have Donna, our director of transportation, on here. We just want to really thank you for your interest and for your enthusiasm about Vision Zero. Milwaukee County, we are now a Vision Zero committed county. We have a goal of achieving that by 2037, and it'll take every single one of us, right? So definitely, though, want to thank our partners and our project team at Tool Design and all the other consultants who are involved in this initiative. There will be other webinars, a couple more that we're planning on later this year. You'll receive that information, but yeah, for now, we're going to dive in to Vision Zero, and just a reminder that this webinar is recorded, and so we'll get a link afterwards, and we can share that out as needed. So, yeah, Sarah, hand it back over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Well, I'd like to second that welcome to you all. I'm always happy when we plan a webinar and people show up and are interested in the topic, so that makes me thrilled right off the bat. But just want to give a brief bit of background here. So we've been working with many of you over the last year to create the Milwaukee County Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, which, as Jeff mentioned, was adopted late last year by the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. And as part of that plan, Milwaukee County has made the commitment to achieving Vision Zero, which is zero fatalities and serious injuries on all the roadways in Milwaukee County by the year 2037. And so all these initiatives fall under the umbrella of the Milwaukee County Complete Communities Transportation Planning Project. So that's what this effort is all about. Over the last few months, we've met with many of you to better understand and identify ways that the county can help you meet your safety goals. And as part of those discussions, we asked about various topics that you'd like to learn more about so that you can both advocate and implement safety programs and projects in your communities. Time and time again, Vision Zero came up. And the main gist of the conversations that we had with the communities was that staff, and in many cases the electeds, were completely on board with the concept of Vision Zero, but wanted to know more about what implementation would actually look like and what it actually means to be a Vision Zero community. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So today's webinar, Jeff sent out a brief description of it, but basically we'll do a quick overview of Vision Zero policies, programs, and projects, as well as offer a foundation in the safe systems approach. Many of you probably already know about this just based on your training and your work already in the communities, but I want to make sure that we all start on the same page. Then we'll switch to the fun part, which is the peer panel. And we'll have three panelists. We have David Salmon from Sun Prairie, Jessica Weinberg, who many of you know from the city of Milwaukee, and our one out-of-state person, JM, came all the way virtually from Dublin, Ohio, so we're excited to have him. And they all will be talking about their experiences becoming Vision Zero in speed management cities. So to start off, there are a lot of names on my Zoom board, and I don't think we quite have enough time to go around and do introductions for everybody, but I would love to get a sense of just who's here in the room. And so just a couple things to put in the chat. So your name, your position, what community you're part of, and this last one is for my personal sanity today. If you could put in your best advice on how to handle a day in May that feels like December, I feel like we're probably all going through that right now. So go ahead, put that in the chat, and we'll get a sense of who is here in the Zoom room today. And as Jeff said, we at Tool Design are kind of hosting this webinar in partnership with Milwaukee County DOT. I'm Sarah Schooley. I'm a principal planner at Tool Design, and I'm joined by Drew Parker, who is a senior planner also here at Tool Design. I have worked with many of the communities on this call, and myself here in Milwaukee County. Drew, we're bringing in from Ann Arbor, Michigan. He has many years of expertise doing safety plans, Vision Zero work, and all that good stuff. So I'm excited to have him on the call to kind of beef up our knowledge and our experience across the country. And for those of you that don't know, Tool Design is a planning, engineering, and design firm that focuses on active transportation and safety. And we're thrilled to be partnering with the county and you all to talk about and move the needle towards zero deaths in Milwaukee County. So I see some really great suggestions in how to handle the weather. So thank you. I appreciate that. So today's goals moving forward are to understand Vision Zero and the Safe Systems approach. I want everybody to come off this call really understanding what that means and able to kind of sell the concept. Then we'll see what Vision Zero looks like on the ground. We'll explore and discuss some funding and implementation strategies. And the main goal at the end is I want you to come out of this thinking about what Vision Zero could look like in your community and have a good guess as to what some of those first steps might be. So what is Vision Zero? We want to kind of ask this question to you. So I know you all just put your names in the chat. If you all could also put in, when you hear Vision Zero, what does it mean to you? Whether it's kind of technical, logistical, emotional, what are those things? And I'm going to show a quick video that many of you may have seen to just frame us and what Vision Zero means for the county.
So last year, 213 people died on our roads. What do you think would be a more acceptable number?
Acceptable? 70 maybe? Probably 70.
Can you send 70? Actually, this is what 70 people looks like. What do you think would be a more acceptable number?
0.
0 is just that. Vision Zero is shifting the mindset. I see Claire's definition in the chat. It's shifting that mindset that views traffic fatalities and injuries as preventable. It also says that they are unacceptable. And so Vision Zero is not only a goal technically, but it's a way of a community stating the morals behind traffic safety and kind of their responsibility to create a roadway network where serious injuries and deaths don't happen. I'll turn it over to Drew to go through the core elements of Vision Zero.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's a really powerful video. I've seen that video probably 10 times and it gets me every time. So sorry if I'm a little choked up just thinking about that. So the first thing I want to start with here is to talk about the core elements of Vision Zero, and this comes from the Vision Zero network. They identified these 10 core elements. The two I really want to highlight, though, are the top two across the top of the slide there. So the public, high-level, and ongoing commitment to zero and the context-appropriate speeds. I think the communities that we see be the most successful are the ones that have a mayor, high-level departmental officials that are really committed to Vision Zero, and that really goes a long way towards making all the elements run more smoothly, I would say. And then context appropriate speeds I also like to highlight because that's really the focus of Vision Zero, is reducing speeds to a level where if crashes do occur, they can be survivable. So that's really also a guiding light throughout all Vision Zero work. And if you want to go to the next slide, Sarah. So kind of talking a little bit more about this theme, we want you to contrast the meaning of the words crash and accident. And in the chat, if you want to just write, why do you think that Vision Zero prefers the word crash over the word accident? And we'll give you a second to put some information in the chat there, and then I'll talk about it. So for the sake of time, I'll talk about this a little bit more. So, yeah, okay, there. So a few answers going right. So, yeah, accident makes something seem like it's unavoidable. It's like a oopsies, or that's just the way the world works. It's accidents happen, when in reality, there's a lot of factors that lead up to a crash happening that we can account for and try to fix our system. The best corollary I've heard for this is when we talk about plane crashes. You don't hear anybody ever say there's a plane accident, because when there's a plane crash, it's a very tragic event. We investigate why the crash happened, and we make changes to our system to try to prevent future plane crashes from happening. So we want to shift that thinking to think about crashes on our transportation, the rest of our transportation system, in the same way. Thanks for all the good answers in the chat there. All right, so the next slide I have here is really more about systemic safety and the safe system approach. So there's been a shift, which interestingly, that video I think is from Australia. There's been a shift, a lot of which has started in Australia and New Zealand, to looking more at the safe system approach instead of taking this more traditional approach to safety planning. And we like to think about this as, where are you on your safe system journey? So the more conventional approach historically has said, we want to prevent crashes. Crashes are bad. But the safe system approach is much more focused on preventing death and serious injuries, and understanding that those are the life-changing crashes, and we need to focus exclusively on those crashes and not worry so much about fender bender, property damage type crashes. The traditional approach has historically said we need to improve human behavior and focus on changing people. But the safe system approach is more focused on designing for human mistakes and limitations, and designing a system that's forgiving when people do make mistakes, so that those mistakes don't become fatal or result in a serious injury. And the next one here, in the traditional approach, we've thought about controlling speeding, which is important. We always want to reduce speeds, but the safe system approach takes this to another level and thinks about reducing system kinetic energy. So thinking about our users and what is a tolerable force on their body that they can take that will not result in a fatality or a serious injury. So speeding is part of it, but it's also about this system and how streets and our roadways are designed to lessen those impact forces. And then in the traditional approach, we've also said historically that individuals are responsible. This is related to the improving human behavior, kind of focusing on the individual, whereas the safe system approach is more about sharing responsibility across all people, from roadway users, but also roadway designers, those that operate and maintain roads. And historically, we've also really focused on reacting based on crash history. So where have crashes occurred in the past, kind of looking at hotspot analysis. The safe system approach takes that one level further and says that's important, but it's also important to proactively identify and address risks in other locations where crashes haven't occurred, but have all the same risk factors that could result in a crash that just hasn't happened yet. You can go to the next slide. All right, so the last slide that I have in this section is the Swiss cheese model, and this also comes from the public health world, but thinking about building in redundancy to your system. So the safe system approach has 5 different elements. It has safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. And so thinking about in any situation where there can be a crash, how can we build redundancy and enhance all 5 of those elements so that there is never a situation where all 5 of those elements fail. So in the graphic on the left, there's redundancy built into the system. The holes within the Swiss cheese are in different places, so a crash doesn't occur, a fatal serious injury crash doesn't occur. And the system on the right, where there's not redundancies, there's a failure in the same location on all of those systems, and that's when a fatal or serious injury crash can occur. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sarah.
Let me unmute. There we go. So the question to you all here is, why does Vision Zero matter in Milwaukee County? And I think we probably all have a lot of really good reasons for that. Kind of statistically, we know that there's data that shows that Vision Zero matters in Milwaukee County. The county experiences an average of almost 90 traffic deaths a year since 2020. And I think we can all agree that this is an unacceptable statistic. And we also know, and Jessica can talk about this a little bit later, that the city of Milwaukee has really been a leader in the county around Vision Zero. So much, in fact, that the city set a Vision Zero goal of 2037, and the county joined in that commitment to find consistency across the county. The county also committed to defining a downward trend, and so to really see their movement, aiming to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes by 25% every 3 years between 2025 and 2037. And so this statement and this acknowledgement shows that it's not a one-stop shop, that it's not all going to happen in a year, but that there's a variety of programs, policies, and projects that are going to move that needle towards zero. But as we know, numbers are just numbers, and we are here really at this webinar to talk about what implementation looks like and how we can go from that 90 serious injuries and 90 fatalities a year to zero. So there are 4 major items that help communities get to Vision Zero. And these can come in all shapes, sizes, and combinations, but these are the 4 main themes. So the first main item is that communities look to lower speed limits. As Drew talked about, high speeds result in higher kinetic energy, which results in more serious and fatal crashes. So we definitely want to limit those speeds. There's also Vision Zero resolutions and public commitments. So this is kind of that community side of enhancing and creating a Vision Zero community. Then there's updating design standards or design policies to prioritize safety. This also makes it really systemic, that things will not be able to be built or put in place in a community unless they meet a set of safe design standards. And then there's that integration into comprehensive or transportation plans. And so it's this step that really creates that longevity for Vision Zero and safety work.
All right, I'll pick up here. So a couple of example policies. These again come from the Vision Zero network. If you haven't heard of the Vision Zero network, I would check it out. They have a lot of great resources. It's a network of cities that are committed to Vision Zero, and they create great resources. So we've pulled some information from there. Some policy examples are in Seattle on their arterial streets. They reduced speed limits from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour in some key locations where they had some high profile crashes, issues with speeding, especially like street racing, high-end speeding. And making that change along with some design changes in key locations, they did a study a couple of years later and found that crashes were down 39%, and they also reduced high-end speeding on those key arterial streets that they focused on. In Philadelphia, they instituted a speed camera program that they also saw significantly reduced crashes involving pedestrians. And then the last example we have here is from Portland, Oregon. They reduced the speed limit on their local streets from 25 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour blanket across the city. And they also put up a lot of new signs and increased the frequency of signs in some locations. And they, even just with that small policy change, saw a pretty significant reduction in speeds, and especially top-end speeds on local streets. So look, all these are pretty low cost examples of policy changes that made a big difference. If you want to go to the next slide, Sarah. So programs, thinking about some of the things that you already do and how can you incorporate Vision Zero into those programs. Some examples of this might be if you have safe routes to school planning, if there is a slow zone initiative that you can undertake, maybe driver awareness campaigns, refocusing those on Vision Zero messaging, and then anything that you do with communications with schools and public meetings, adding in Vision Zero education to those elements. Go to the next slide there. So we have a couple of different examples here of kind of program-wide treatments that different cities have taken. So we have four different example cities here as case studies. I would say Hoboken has gotten a lot of attention lately. Hoboken and the mayor has been on like a speaking tour, I think, for the past couple of years because they have achieved Vision Zero, at least for fatalities, for a number of years. And they've taken a lot of different approaches, but one of the most significant approaches, I think, is quick build intersection redesigns, like across the city, really systemically. It's not like 1, 2, 3 things they're doing. It's like looking at every intersection, seeing how they can improve visibility, maybe add raised crosswalks, curb extensions using striping and flex posts, and really like systematically changing the look and feel and design of intersections to make them safer for people walking, biking, and driving. So that's a great example. Jersey City has taken a pretty similar approach, and then we have a couple other examples that you could look into more later with Fremont and Alexandria here. And I'll pass it to Sarah.
Yeah, and while, Drew sang the praises of Hoboken and some other communities, I think, we're doing some pretty great stuff around here in Milwaukee County. So here's some photos of a few projects, some of which there are representatives from those communities here on the call. But I'd love if, now that we talked about Vision Zero and kind of those Vision Zero concepts and that shift between the traditional approach and the Vision Zero approach, I would love it if you could put some projects in the chat in your communities that you feel like really align with the Vision Zero goals and policies and mindset. Because I think a lot of the projects that may be happening in your communities, they're not being done necessarily as Vision Zero projects, but they're being done in a way that meets a lot of those same Vision Zero goals. So go ahead and put some projects that you want to brag about in the chat. One thing that a lot of these on-the-ground projects have are, items and facilities and infrastructure that aims to slow people down, make people more visible, and reduce conflicts. Many of you will probably already know about the FHWA Proven Safety Countermeasures list, which shows a variety of these ways to make it happen. So many of these elements are in the projects that we showed on the previous slides, and I'm sure will be part of many of the projects that show up in the chat. We also know that Vision Zero is about making sure that projects impact the people that are most likely to be impacted by traffic violence. So in Milwaukee County, and this is part of the Safe Communities report that was done last year, we found that men, Black residents, and young adults are overrepresented in fatal and serious injury crashes. And so as we think about projects, it's not necessarily only about the project type, but there is also an element of where in the city or where in your community does it make most sense to do that project in order to have the biggest impacts on the people that often suffer the most on our roadway. And Drew, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide here. So I think this is the last thing we want to leave you with before we open it up to our panelists. Just talking about funding, I think a lot of people with Vision Zero think this is just another thing that I have to fund in my community, and where am I going to find additional funding for it? And there are some great grant programs out there, and we've listed some here, especially with the Safer Streets and Roads for All program, which has one more round of funding after the current year, and then HSIP, which is an ongoing program through state DOTs and via WSDOT in your area. But we want you to think about how you can rethink your existing funding sources and the existing programs that you're working on to incorporate safety first and to incorporate Vision Zero, so that it's not something that is an add-on, but it's actually something that is incorporated into everything that you do and every program that you think about, whether it be, you know, resurfacing, if you're going out to do curb ramps, if you do a curb ramp project, maybe that curb ramp project turns into a curb extension because you've heard that there's issues with crossing at that location, that sort of thing. So thinking about ways that you can incorporate this into everything that you do and not think of it as one more thing that you have to do. That's what we want to leave you with on this slide. And with that, we'll switch over to our panelist portion.
Great. So, you know, this is really the fun part of the show, where we bring in, you know, communities from here in Wisconsin and outside to talk a little bit about what it looks like for them to be a Vision Zero, or, you know, a community that really looks to reduce speeds for the purposes of reducing and eliminating serious injuries and fatalities on their roadway. So we have three folks. As I said before, we have Jessica from here in Milwaukee, we have David from Sun Prairie, and Jan from Dublin. And I gave them a couple kind of prompt questions to help them put together a couple slides and a couple points, so we will go through them kind of one at a time. After that, I have a few kind of set and queued up questions for them. These are questions that were on the survey that were sent out over the last week, and you all did some ranking, so we have your top questions as well as some questions that were submitted. But as folks are talking, feel free to put questions in the chat. Kind of how we're hoping the rest of this webinar runs is, you know, for the next 30 minutes, we'll have our community speak and then answer the set questions. But we have committed all of our guests to staying on for another 30 minutes. So if folks want to stay and ask and get answered or have discussions on other Vision Zero things, we definitely want to continue that conversation. So with that, Jessica, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I will keep my comments pretty brief. You can access me anytime here in Milwaukee, but I'm so thankful that all the municipalities in Milwaukee County are working, and the county itself are all working together on this. Very few of our problems respect municipal boundaries, and so, you know, I hope our solutions can cross those as well, and I'm excited to partner with everybody here. Let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to just kind of update people where the city of Milwaukee is. We have an action plan that is going to go before committee in June. I think people who live in the county and work in the county have driven through the city and seen a lot of physical changes, but I wanted to kind of focus on some of the other things that we are doing. So in our plan, we have these 7 large strategic goals, and we have the primary, you know, city department listed for each of these, but I kind of invite everybody to think about their own possible role within some of these, and if there's, you know, additional opportunities for partnership. And when I was reading through these and thinking about issues that really cross borders, I thought that number 4 on this list, number 2 on this list, supporting accountability in the justice system with a focus on prevention, is just something that really crosses borders, since so many of those activities are at the county level. So if we go to the next slide, I kind of zoomed in on some of the key actions that we hope to undertake in these areas. You know, this is a mix of being based on community input, best practices in the field, insights from our own staff. So here, you know, 2 of our big ideas are we need to support options in the court system that emphasize prevention, education, accountability, and harm repair. An exciting thing there, number 8, is that we are working with the Andrews Restorative Justice Center to pilot a restorative justice circle where youth, adjudicated youth who have participated in a vehicle-related crime will have the opportunity to sit down with surrogate victim and really have healing on both sides of that experience. So that's a very exciting thing that we're going to be doing. And I just want to share, kind of put out these different ideas so that when we think about Vision Zero, we're thinking about that, very broad safe systems approach, part of which is for sure the built environment, but also policy and law changes in other domains. So I just kind of welcome people to participate with us in any of these and, pick up the phone, give me a call, shoot me an email if you want to be engaged in any of these activities or have insights. But I think, we have to do a lot in the built environment. That definitely is a focus. There's a reason that is number one on our 7 strategic areas in our plan. But we do want to be exploring all these other areas so that we have each slice of that Swiss cheese. And I think that's my last slide.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Jessica. And don't worry, everybody, she'll be back to answer some questions in a little bit. And with that, we will turn it over to David.
Hello, everyone. My name's David Salmon. I'm the transportation coordinator with the City of Sun Prairie. A little bit about my role. I am an urban planner by training, and I'm leading our traffic safety team, including our Vision Zero initiatives as well as active transportation initiatives. We have a nice new Vision Zero action plan as well as an active transportation plan to guide both of those efforts. And then I'm also responsible for public transit service. We are lucky to have Madison Metro Transit come all the way out to Sun Prairie, and so that is a big part of my role. I just wanted to mention I grew up in Shorewood, so it's very encouraging to see all the communities in Milwaukee County taking this big step forward. Again, I grew up riding the bus and riding my bike and know how much has changed really since I was a kid in Milwaukee, and so it's very encouraging to see you all kind of rising to this occasion. Next slide, please. So a little context about Sun Prairie. We are the 2nd largest city in Dane County, but we are really at the edge of the Madison urban area. And among other things, what that has created is a very car-centered place. So we are divided from the rest of Madison by the interstate, and then because of the interstate and US Highway 151, we really have kind of grown around the car. But we're also growing fast. Our population has just about doubled since 2000, from 20,000 people to almost 40,000 in 2024. And so, I think similar to some of the communities in Milwaukee County who are experiencing that kind of edge growth, I think we're a very similar community in a lot of ways. Next slide. So Sun Prairie's story began in 2020. There was a fatal pedestrian crash on Main Street, and right in the heart of Sun Prairie. This really is the kind of main east-west arterial that connects quite a lot of housing, our downtown, high school, on the east side of town to the west side of Sun Prairie, which is a large commercial area, and that's also how folks access the rest of Madison through the interstate. We ultimately had 4 pedestrian fatalities within 12 months. This was in 2020. 3 of them were in central Sun Prairie, which is a very diverse neighborhood, has a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing, and again is really kind of the heart of our community. And then we had 1 at the edge of the city in a more rural location on State Highway 19. And so some of the first steps that we ended up taking was at the location where we had that pedestrian fatality. The city installed a pedestrian median refuge, an RRFB, and kind of immediately saw a lot of positive changes there. Again, because you can see in that picture there are some apartment buildings just to the north of this, and then Walmart is just to the south, and so there's a lot of folks that were crossing Main Street to get to Walmart, and this was just not a safe location for them. So that was kind of one of the first things we did. We also created a pedestrian safety task force which was a staff-led effort to really kind of bring all of the different departments and key stakeholders within the city together. So this involved public works, community development, police, and our engineering team. And that ended up leading to us reducing the speed limit on East Main Street. And so those all kind of happened within 1 year of that tragic fatality. But those are some of the first steps that we took. So why did Sun Prairie become a Vision Zero community? Ultimately, that kind of concentrated harm that happened in 2020 and 2021 really shocked the community. We're not that big of a place that this kind of stuff isn't really felt pretty widely by a lot of people, and so I think that really kind of raised the concerns folks were having. On top of that, because of how much we were growing, there has been a lot more traffic. And that has created some pretty consistent pressure on the city to manage the transportation system better. You know, one of the biggest things we hear from the community, like the biggest concerns that come out in city council races, is speeding and traffic. And so, you know, ultimately, I think those two things really kind of created some momentum for us. There's also a really strong culture in Sun Prairie around running to help. I'm sure you can relate with a lot of your communities, and so I think that helped to really put Vision Zero in our sights and say that you know, if we're going to really focus on our community's health and well-being, then we really should be as proactive and strategic as possible in kind of mitigating harm. So the last thing I'll mention, and again we'll get into some more detail during the panel, we also chose 2035 as a Vision Zero target, particularly because we wanted to be ambitious. Obviously, 10 years is not necessarily and I should say we adopted that plan this year, so 10 years isn't a super long window to really make pretty systematic changes in our community. When we're talking about, you know, CIPs and the lead into construction projects and all of the rest, but we felt that really kind of gave us some good pressure. And then it also gave our planning and budgeting processes focus. We're excited about that. We think that it's a doable target for us, and excited for the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. And last but not least, JM, I will turn it over to you to talk about Dublin.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Excited to share what we're doing in Dublin. Dublin is the largest suburb of Columbus, Ohio, the capital city. We have about 50,000 people for reference, and you can go to the next slide and dig into it. So we have a speed management program, but we don't necessarily have a Vision Zero program enacted. We have a study underway right now to get there. So we kind of did things in reverse when we adopted a speed management program prior to a Vision Zero study or Vision Zero program. Our goals of the speed management is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, very similar to what you would expect in a Vision Zero study or plan. We want to reduce excessive speeding, which we define as speeding over 15 miles per hour, the posted speed limit, and then develop strategies to address concerns on Dublin streets. Next slide. So we created a whole program and toolbox, and we have 3 different categories that we will designate based on results that we receive from speed data collection. So category 1, we have looking at the 85th percentile as well as the average speeds, and then based on what that difference is, we make the determination if this is a category 1, 2, or 3. It's important to note if we see excessive speeds over 1%, it's automatically a category 3. So that allows us to look at more tools to mitigate what we're seeing in the field. Next slide. So one of the ways we do this is, it's important to notice that this is a very data-informed, data-driven program. We have stealth stats or speed surveys that we put out based on information we receive from the public, our police department, and also a new program using Urban SDK, which is a cloud-based platform leveraging connected vehicle data to understand where are those vehicle speeds happening, and maybe we can get ahead of it by looking at certain segments and then doing a speed survey to then indicate what tools can we use based on that category. So this is how we do it. You'll see that in red on the left, we'll have the 85th percentile speed, and then we're looking at the average speed, and then we see where this would land. So in this scenario, it's good to see that the excessive speeding is under 1%, it's 0.1, but we do look at the 85th percentile, which is above the posted speed limit of 25, and so this would be a category 2 since we round up and it's about, we'll say it's 29 miles per hour. So then we have a whole toolbox to see what we could use to mitigate some of the speeding we're seeing. Next slide. We're very big on transparency and public engagement. We have a whole website dedicated to slowing our campaign called Slow Down Dublin. I'll put a link in the chat. But this is a way that we can be transparent with how we're going to tackle speeding, ways that the public can get involved. You'll see at the left, there's a speed concern hyperlink that you can submit concerns you have in the city. But we have this dashboard you see on the right, and it shows where our rotating feedback, driver feedback signs are, as well as the police speed trailers. We talk about the monthly traffic stops, as well as the monthly citations. On the right, you'll see all those markers are speed surveys, and different colors indicate different categories of based on the speed management program. And then we are tracking our fatal and serious injury crashes. So while we begin to see a little bit of a dip, it is recurring, and so we need to stay on top of the speeding in our community. Next slide. One thing, I'm not sure what the situation is in your state, but under Ohio Revised Code, even though we're a home rule state, we still have to establish a business district to have local control over speed limits, particularly as it relates to state routes. So we had to create a business district. This is taking into account our historic district and our new downtown area. So as redevelopment happens, that is more contextual to an urban walkable environment, which is what is happening currently today. We will lower speed limits in alignment with the context that the development's happening. So right now we've lowered Riverside Drive. I think if you hit the next slide, it might highlight it. Yeah, so that's what popped up in the center. Riverside Drive was 40 miles per hour, and then we've had this redevelopment of a walkable community and mixed-use development. So it was inappropriate to have that kind of speed in this neighborhood. So we reduced it to 25 miles per hour thanks to the establishment of this business district. And we'll continue to lower speed limits of the roadways highlighted in cyan as redevelopment occurs and it's appropriate to do so. And then next slide. And that's it.
That's it. Okay, thank you, JM. So that was really exciting to hear from all three of those communities because they're all, coming from different places, different approaches, kind of different reasons for getting there. But as they were each talking, it made me think a little bit about, various communities that I've talked with around here in Milwaukee County for the last couple of months. So I think that the experiences that these folks have had and these communities have had hopefully will be really useful. So we're going to start with our top-rated question in the survey that went out. And probably before this webinar, I should have designated, who leads each question off. But JM, Jessica, and David, I'll let you wrestle it out. So this first question is, describe your work to change road user behavior, especially driver behavior. I don't know if there's one of you that wants to take this on first.
I can give a quick answer. I think people on the call probably have seen the Speeding We Can Live Without It campaign, and that really was aimed at drivers. And we actually had a good amount of scientific kind of research informing that campaign. We shaped the campaign based on a survey with people who said that they sped when they drove, and that's exactly who we wanted to connect with. So we surveyed those people, and that helped determine kind of the flavor and the design of the campaign. And then our follow-up survey, we do feel like there was good results of people saying that they were understood the impacts of speeding, were less likely to speed, and to talk to others about it. So, that big campaign piece, that public education is in the mix for us, along with a lot of built environment and other changes.
I can also jump in. I mentioned the urban SDK data that we use to monitor traffic speeds and then indicate if we need to focus anywhere. And then we have the rotating driver feedback signs, but we installed permanent driver feedback signs at all of our school zones. to help with that compliance with enforcement. One thing I didn't mention is we started using speed cameras at 4 locations, and this is a partnership with Traffic Logics and DACRA. So based on the camera data, it will proactively address speeding without immediate penalties. So we'll automatically send out letters saying, hey, Mr. Smith, we saw you speeding on X street on this date. Please be respectful and slow down for the rest of the community. Something of that nature. I'm just paraphrasing here. But I think we're hoping to see good results from that. But as we indicated with the driver feedback signs, we have to continue rotating some of those locations for getting the compliance and behavior that we expect to see, because that will dissipate over time.
Yeah, and I can hop in for Sun Prairie. I will say I think a core part of how we are hoping to change road user behavior is through design. Obviously, that's a slower thing. I think we're a little bit early in our implementation of really kind of targeted road user behavior. We use targeted enforcement on our key roads and areas that we know that we're having speeding issues. But I think we're in implementing our Vision Zero plan. We're focusing on trying to do similar initiatives like what Milwaukee has done, and also partnering probably on a regional scale to try and accomplish that. Again, City of Madison's also a Vision Zero community. There's quite a few in the Madison area. And then the other is, I think, working, again, probably across city, kind of with other organizations and across municipalities on drivers' education initiatives. I know that's one of the things that comes up quite a lot, and when we look at crash data, who's involved, it's often teen drivers and older drivers, and so providing opportunity for better education and re-education is definitely something that we're looking for.
Great. And if I could ask a kind of a follow-up sub-question for this, is with any of your efforts, have you shown any measurable effects on driver behaviors? JM, it sounds like maybe there's, the speed cameras that are around. Has there been any data gathered on the impact of any of this work?
Yeah, just to add, with the speed, the stealth stats or the speed surveys that we do, we did 3 tactical urbanism projects last year, and we did speed surveys before and after. We're also doing speed surveys before the speed cameras that I just mentioned are deployed on those 4 locations, and then we'll do an after speed survey to see, how much impact is it having and how long is it lasting. Because we've seen with some of the tactical urbanism projects, they're really cool in my opinion, but some of them don't hold on to the effectiveness as long as we'd like to see once they're removed.
Jessica or David, are you all doing any measurement of your efforts to see that impacts?
Yeah, and I don't know if David Tapia or anyone else on the call wants to tap in and share as well. More than welcome. But the city does do speed studies before and after most of these projects, and that's our leading indicator. The crash studies, we need more time in the post period to really determine how effective the interventions have been. But traffic calming interventions, we looked at like about 20 that we've done over the past few years, and collectively the reduction in speeds was about 30%. Any sort of speeding reduced by 30%, and speeding more than 10 miles and over the limit was reduced by 40%. So, those are really wonderful numbers that really point to that these things are working. And as we have multiple years of post data again, then we can double back and check on the crash side and the injury and fatality side.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. And I would also encourage, I'm thinking of kind of follow-up questions as folks are talking, but if people have any either follow-up questions or clarification questions as we go through this, please feel free to either shout it out or put it in the chat, and we'll make sure that it gets answered. Okay, question 2. How have you funded your Vision Zero work? Have you gotten additional funding, reallocations, or how does that work? And David, if I could start with you, because I think you are the only one with the fully adopted Vision Zero plan. So you might be a little ahead of the game when it comes to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the areas where Sun Prairie is really excelling is the way, different ways that we're approaching funding this. So we have received funding through HISAP for a number of intersection improvements. Again, that's kind of in partnership with the state for that funding. And then we're also using the STVG urban funding that the Madison area gets. We've been awarded a couple of projects and use that to move forward with, kind of narrowing roadways. That's kind of become one of our default practices is basically we over-designed a lot of residential streets, and our collectors and so on. And so whenever we are doing any kind of rehab reconstruction, we're looking at, is there an opportunity to move those curbs in? Certainly at reconstruction, we're doing that again by default, and then on rehab is, hey, if there's this half block stretch and there isn't parking demand there, then we're going to move curbs in there too. So we're using our STVG Urban for that. And then we're also using our local CIP for our just kind of annual street rehab and reconstruction money. And then we've also received some LRIP funding from the state that we're going to be using next year on a project that is likely to become a bike boulevard and include some other traffic calming improvements. We've also created an annual pot of funding in our CIP specifically for pedestrian safety improvements, and so that largely has been going to installing RRFEs and pedestrian refuges and doing some curb extensions. Starting next year, we're going to be kind of broadening the scope of that just to be, more generally kind of a Vision Zero implementation pot of money. Largely we're doing these as kind of one-off projects, but also this is a little pot of money that we can kind of pull into other projects to say, hey, we need a little bit of money to make our street rehab work. And that's definitely having a good impact for us.
Great, thanks. Dan or Jessica?
I don't think I have too much to add, except that we were able to use tax increment financing district excess funds to do some creative work.
In Dublin's example, we rely on our income tax and our capital improvement plan. Since we don't have a Vision Zero program enacted, but we have the study underway, we use the capital budget to pay for the study. And then there's been one-off projects, like for example, we are looking to build or install 2 high-intensity activated crosswalks or hawk signals in the city next year, and then we're looking to study an additional 7 sites after that. So as we get more information on what are really good projects to put forward, we'll submit them to the CIP for consideration.
Great, thanks. And that, Jan, you're talking about the CIP, and David, you also mentioned, the specific pot for pedestrian safety money. I think that also shows that kind of systemic way that you are putting Vision Zero into your plans, is that it's not necessarily, new money coming down that you wouldn't have if you weren't a Vision Zero city, but really thinking about how you prioritize existing funding. So I'm just wondering, with the CIP, or maybe it's in the Vision Zero plan, is there a new metric that helps you decide what goes into the CIP, or is there some sort of prioritization criteria that you use or have used to get these kind of more Vision Zero or speed management projects into the CIP?
In terms of, let's say shared use paths or other pedestrian facilities that are high comfort, low stress, we have a prioritization tool that we use, and safety is weighted 25% of those scores to prioritize what projects go forward or that we'll submit for consideration into the capital budget. And then we do have a C management plan that was adopted in 2023, so those provide recommendations for us to also feed into the CIP.
Yeah, and I think for Sun Prairie, we have not created any prioritization criteria yet. I think we have really focused on, again, places where there are fatalities and serious injuries that have happened to say, again, what can we do to improve those areas? And those are kind of priority locations. And then we also, we rely heavily on what the community is telling us as far as what feels unsafe. And then, that gives us the opportunity to go out and do some studies and observations. So we've added some RFBs in some school areas based on comments, and then our observations as well as in our downtown. I think our plan and, the way that we've set up our CIP is, so we have a 10-year CIP, and, more or less the plan for us is, so we've got the $100,000 annually. The goal is to create a 10-year plan so that we know basically what are the hotspot intersections, where should we be planning all of these additional, traffic calming, RFBs, whatever they might be, and then to basically kind of go back into the CIP and actually say this intersection this year, and so on and so forth. And so I think once we get to that, then we're probably going to end up using some criteria to say which ones should go first, which ones go second. But at this point, yeah, we're really kind of relying on our high injury network.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move us on to the next question. And Michael May, I see your question in the chat, and I think that kind of attaches to the next question a little bit. So I will get that addressed. Okay. So the next part here, or the next question, is asking about where the momentum for being a Vision Zero city started. And this question comes from, our previous discussions with the municipalities, whether this is something that, the electeds need to have as their idea, or it comes from the community, or it comes from staff. So just interested in kind of the storyline for each of your communities about how that happened. And David, I know you mentioned that there were a couple of rapid, or in quick succession, fatal pedestrian crashes that really kind of shocked the community and made that movement happen. But for Dublin and Milwaukee, kind of how did it all start for you all?
I would say for Dublin, it was more of a top-down approach that City Council initiated this request. It was more of an update to our traffic calming program from I think 2004, and probably COVID and other behavior that was observed on the roadways probably helped push this along a little bit faster. But I would say that it was carried forward by the city manager, and then staff tackled it. And I am okay with this because it kind of aligns all the budgets, policy, and other priorities together, as we're doing these projects and making sure that we're working in lockstep to get them executed.
And I'll add that our initial energy behind this was definitely grassroots. The Coalition for Safer Driving really was the driving force to raise the alarm. One, about reckless driving, and then two, that Vision Zero really was like a comprehensive community wide way to address the issue. And through their advocacy, the mayor and the Common Council realized, yes, this is something we want to do. And so pretty quickly, the politics aligned with the community advocacy, and we passed our resolution. And now I think it's a continual feedback, just back and forth, community, political leaders, community pushing, political leaders leading. Now we're really in just a dance going back and forth.
It's a healthy, ongoing dance, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So on that note, so Michael submitted a question in the chat. Looks like they are sold on creating the Vision Zero work, but they're now looking at forming a Vision Zero team. So I think this kind of attaches to not only starting that momentum, but kind of keeping that momentum going. And so his question is, if you have a team who's on it, how often do you meet? And kind of how, in general, how does it operate if you have one?
I can jump in and then go from there.
Yeah.
We meet quarterly with our police department, specifically a unit, like the Community Impact Unit, I believe is the official title. These are the officers that work on enforcement and patrol of maintenance zones, problem areas. So meet with them quarterly to go over some of the Category 3s that happen as we do speed surveys, the most horrific offenders, if you will. And then we figure out where we want to allocate law enforcement resources and then also work with them on their speed trailers as we have our own driver feedback signs to make sure we're not overlapping or doing duplicative work. So I think quarterly is a good cadence. It's not a full-fledged Vision Zero committee, albeit, but it's our kind of our speed management quarterly coordination meetings that we have with police.
Yeah, in Sun Prairie, our team meets monthly, and the team's made up of Public Works. I'm kind of the community development planning side of things, and then there is the police department there. And so again, we're kind of looking at crashes, we're reviewing complaints, we're kind of, working through some of the bigger picture questions. A lot of times we'll get requests for all-way stops and things like that. So we're, that team is really reviewing and talking about all of that stuff. I will say that for our Vision Zero action plan, we brought in a much larger coalition for our steering committee. And so we ended up having, again, Public Works there. We had the DOT involved. Our MPO was there. We also got economic development involved with our downtown business district. So obviously, so safety in our downtown has been a concern. We're going to be doing an urban design project to create more pedestrian space right in our downtown. And so I think there was kind of some momentum there. We also had Parks, Rec, and Forestry to come in again, I think, kind of on some of our programmatic stuff. They're kind of key allies for that. The school district was involved, and so, that effort itself was a very kind of cross-cutting, really trying to bring everybody who has even a little bit of skin in the game to the table to inform all the actions that we put together. And I think just about everybody that was there has at least one or two action items that they're either a lead on or kind of a key player in.
So for David, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like for the Vision Zero action plan, there was this kind of broader committee that was, multiple departments or outside departments of the city, but then going forward, it's more of a implementer discussion within the city.
Correct, yeah, and I think it's our core stakeholders are the ones that meet every month. Again, we're managing the transportation system, and I share out information with our community development team because, again, when we're talking new developments and, just kind of big picture what's happening in our city, how is it growing and changing, it's just good for everybody to be aware. I know that's one of the big challenges is silos with efforts like this, and, this is one way for us to break that down. I'm in community development, and so I report to the planners and the economic development folks, they know what's happening, and then we can kind of have that in-between conversation with the public works and engineering team.
David, how about you, Jessica?
Yeah, I would say that what Michael's laid out as what he's envisioning is pretty much what we have at the city. We were really lucky to have, the leaders of each of those areas. So we had the fire chief, we had the chief of staff for the police, we had the city engineer, as well as a representative from a judge, and the city attorney would attend as well. And that was our core internal city group to help develop the plan, so that there's buy-in across many of these departments for the plan. But as our plan is getting adopted, and then we have 100 items to achieve, we're going to break into more content areas and implementer groups. And I think that there'll be multiple smaller groups with both internal and external stakeholders to deliver on those 100 action items. But I do think that having the leaders from those agencies to really set the tone, come up with the ideas, and listen to each other to think about innovative strategies that kind of cross their departments is really a wonderful structure to help ensure you have a meaningful plan that'll be effective.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm going to move us to the next question. And again, feel free to add questions to the chat. So this question is, please share your experience with and approach to working with policymakers to consider controversial policy changes on behalf of community advocates. So I'd like to think of this question as a tell us a story question about something that your community has dealt with, especially something that comes straight from the community. And I will leave it up to you guys if you want to jump in on the best story.
So this
Oh,
is
go
the
ahead.
stuff.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I mean, I think this example here, it is difficult and is something we need to work on. I will say in our plan, we have a page about, major research questions and areas where we don't have enough data to really come up with recommendations yet, but we know we need to know more. And I think police chases are one of those things. People really didn't like it when there were no police chases, and now people are very unhappy that there are police chases again, and we really have to understand, what are the crash impacts, what are the other human impacts, what sort of crimes are being prevented in the while a pursuit might be happening, and figure out what that solution is. But I would just say, there's no easy answers here, and in many ways we need more data, more conversations to kind of figure out what our answer is.
Yeah, so I don't think Sun Prairie has dealt with any really big controversial policies like what Jessica was describing, but I do have a story of a very recent one, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate, and it has to do with unwarranted stop signs and requests from the community to add all-way stops because of concerns of speeding and pedestrian safety and other things. And, basically Sun Prairie added one at an intersection. It's a collector, and then it was a local road, and it didn't meet any of the warrants. There was no crash history, but there was a school bus stop, and so, after trying a speed hump for apparently a day, nobody liked it. They said, okay, well, we'll put in an all-way stop, and, I think it's largely been pretty unproblematic. There's been a couple of rear-end crashes now where there was no crash history before, but we went and kind of design that whole corridor and basically kind of addressed from a design standpoint the issues with pedestrian crossing. We were prepared to put an RFB there. We had curb extensions, so it was a much shorter crosswalk. And ultimately the community was still kind of up in arms about this, saying, the children are going to be, kind of overstating the harm and risk there, and kind of discounting the downsides of unwarranted stop signs. And so, I think we didn't end up removing it. We were proposing to get rid of the always stop because of design change. Ultimately, our committee voted against it. But, I think the approach that I took there was really trying to focus on the harm reduction element of this, which is to say, I hear your concerns, and here's the ways that we're trying to reduce harm, right? So we're changing the geometry of the intersection. Here's some of the other traffic calming along the corridor that we think is going to have an impact. And then really helping, our decision makers in particular just understand the trade-offs, because ultimately, I think when we're talking about the politics of this, you want a good process. You want to make sure that the decisions aren't made based out of emotion, just kind of in a reactionary standpoint. You want to make sure that it's well reasoned, and it's kind of well informed, whether or not they make the decision that kind of aligns with the staff recommendation. And so, I think that's generally the approach that we try to take. And our hope from this example is that the next time this kind of a thing comes up, that our committee is going to be much more hesitant to say yes to something that is unwarranted, because we've kind of put all of the trade-offs and the downsides to this particular approach out there, and again said, here's the alternatives that we really should be considering. Here's what research says about these improvements, and so yeah, I think that's kind of the general approach. We'll have to see again next time that comes up if we're able to kind of head off the inevitable slippery slope of unwarranted stop signs. I'm hopeful that we'll at least hopefully be able to find some alternatives before we go there.
I would say during our speed management program discussion, everyone wanted a speed cushion or speed hump on their street. And so while that was great feedback, it was not a necessarily keen idea with our first responders, particularly transporting someone in like an ambulance, but also fire trucks and police. Everyone was not thrilled about having speed cushions everywhere. So we worked with the residents and our decision makers, and where we landed was with our speed management program, vertical solutions such as speed cushions are allowed in Category 3, which is the highest level, but that's only after another intervention has been tried and unsuccessful. So it's kind of like the last resort that we will still consider it, but it's not the first option that we'll look at.
So there were, I know you guys didn't talk about these stories before this, but I feel like there were some common threads through those. I think there's one bit that's, Jessica, when you talked about, there's a page that basically identifies tricky issues that we don't know the answers to yet. And really identifying that these are issues and we don't have the answers. And so part of our Vision Zero work is learning more about these specific issues so that you can have these kind of logical, data-informed, practice-informed discussions and make really educated decisions at some point. And then, David and JM, that kind of stakeholder conversation that you were having, whether it was with the community, and Michael and Donna, I see your comments in the chat to this, making sure that the right people are at the table so that they know what that full conversation is like, and to have that consistency in how you make decisions, whether this is the consistency about whether or not we put in a stop sign, or this is the consistency in whether or not we put in speed humps, but just to make sure that that practice is known to the right partners. And also it sounds like really known internally too, so that, the same output happens with those inputs. So thank you for those stories. Okay, question 5. Why is it important to commit specifically to Vision Zero? So this question really comes from a place of, we're already doing stuff. What's the big deal about whether or not we're Vision Zero? So I guess David or Jessica, if you want to take this one, and then JM, maybe you could do the counterpoint, or maybe you can say, no, Dublin's ready to go. See if we can have a good debate on this one.
Yeah, for me, it's really about communication and having shared goals to achieve meaningful, important change, and just being completely clear internally, externally, with community buy-in and lots of community input that, this is the right goal. How we achieve it, there's debate there. But I really do think Vision Zero is this kind of inarguable goal for communities that really is the right thing to do. And it's so helpful to have that kind of banner to do the harder work of really figuring out the hows and budgets and that day-to-day stuff. But it's, only by being clear about what our goal is that we can have really meaningful discussions and bring more people into the work.
Great.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest reasons why Vision Zero is so powerful compared to just a more traditional kind of safety approach is that it really is focused on reducing harm and the most life-altering kinds of harm that happens. And I think that is really, really focusing, or I should say kind of clarifying for all the people involved when you're saying these are the specific things that we don't find acceptable. And we're taking action to address that. And, I think knowing, particularly Milwaukee County, but really kind of across the U.S., there's really not that many communities that are really, you can live very freely and easily without a car. And so I think that there is kind of an ethical imperative there, as kind of the subject matter experts and working for our local communities to work towards Vision Zero, given that, people are going to be driving and there's going to still be a lot of vehicle traffic, and that we are kind of in this place of needing to retrofit our cities to be safer, given that, again, we're not a place where it really is easy for people to exist without cars. But then on the other side is there are people who do exist and do need to get through their lives without that. So yeah, I think it is really important. And I think one of the actually interesting stories in Sun Prairie is that it has helped to, I think, smooth out some of those maybe perennial conversations, particularly about should we add, curb extensions or speed humps and the plowing question, which is impacting public works and all this other stuff. It feels like Vision Zero really, again, helps to move those conversations forward in a constructive way.
Thanks, David.
I like Vision Zero, but we just did things backwards in Dublin. But I think it's important, and there's ways that I guess let me say that I'm a city planner and I work with a team of engineers, and so we have great conversations, but sometimes we struggle, and this is one of the reasons, one of the areas we struggled was, if we do have a fatality after we commit to Vision Zero, is that a success? Is that a failure? I mean, these are just, philosophical questions we would have as a team in trying to navigate what is the best way forward, how do we word things in a way that we don't put us in a bad position, but we also support the intent of what Vision Zero is. So those are conversations that we continue to have, and I think they're great to have. But we also have made headway in other areas. So we updated our community plan last year, called Envision Dublin, and we completely flipped the paradigm of how we prioritize road users, where pedestrians and cyclists are now at the top instead of private vehicles. And that has now gone to having a maximum intersection size, having roundabouts as our default intersection type rather than the four-way stop. And then we actually went away from level of service. So now we're in a new frontier figuring out what is our more European kind of traffic system that we've adopted. And we've had exchanges with counterparts in the Netherlands to understand how the Dutch also do transportation planning. And I think that's been very helpful for the engineers in our team to also understand that there are ways forward that maybe we're not used to in the United States, but we can learn from other peers around the country and around the world. So I think it's very important to continue down this path, and maybe the words we trip up over, but I think the intent is still to move the city towards zero injuries, serious injuries, and fatalities. And there are trade-offs we have along the way. I don't know how people drive in your area, but in Central Ohio, we seem to struggle with roundabouts that are more than 2 lanes. So it's understanding, what is the public able to navigate, what are they comfortable with, and then what are the limits that we have to deploy, and that the city or the community is comfortable, whether it's driving, biking, cycling, rolling, whatever you do. So I think it's important to keep on going. And from like a higher level, I think we have a very bad track record as a country when it comes to traffic, fatality rates compared to other industrialized countries. So I think it's even more effort or more initiative for us to figure this out and make some progress.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, our last pre-prepared question. What is something that surprised you as you were becoming a Vision Zero city or a speed-focused city, or something that has surprised you since? I'll open it up to whoever wants to take this one.
For me, it's really been like a change in cultural thoughts about traffic enforcement. Like a pendulum has swung kind of quickly from, really working to limit direct police officer interactions with motorists and pedestrians, actually, to people feeling like there really isn't enough. Again, this is very local to Milwaukee, and calling for more enforcement. So, I think this just, it's a very complicated issue, but the speed of that shift has really surprised me.
I guess I can jump in. I mentioned that having that conversation with my team about success and, is human error, can we still achieve zero fatalities and serious injuries? Valid questions, but I found it a little interesting to have those conversations because I was very supportive of what the effort is, but understanding some of the concerns that the engineers have on the team. But honestly, I was very surprised by our police department. I know over the past couple of years, there's been instances where there's not been great interactions with police and the public. So it was really encouraging to see that our police department is not punitive, but they really are educational driven. They want to help the community and they want to, be an example for others. So maybe not everyone in the police department is, following that, but so many of the police officers I've worked with are, and it's very encouraging and it's kind of, I guess, restored my faith in law enforcement as we've struggled through some of the things we've seen over the past several years.
Yeah, so I think I've got two things that surprised me, and I actually would agree with what JM shared about I think it's about, and maybe just about the topic of enforcement, that I think it is often kind of one of the things that people point to say, oh, if only we had more enforcement, there would be less speeding, and, just kind of this cycle of talking about that and, getting to know the police more, knowing that, it's just more complicated, that, they really do want to help the community, but, they know there are limitations to what they can do, and there's the kind of halo effect when the police officer is there. And so I think that has been really helpful for me in just, seeing that even police are willing to come to the table and offer alternatives and really be engaged in that conversation, to say, yeah, I mean, enforcement is part of the piece, but here's other things, particularly as it relates to that. I think one of the big things that has surprised me, and maybe it shouldn't, but it is that, again, and maybe you all have experienced this with some of your elected officials and community members, it's just that there can often be kind of inconsistency with how people view, again, their perceptions about unsafe intersections. And then I think with driving in particular, that something that almost everybody experiences and knows firsthand. And I think that there can be a sense in the community that they know what kinds of things will work, and that can be a really hard conversation to navigate when people are kind of set, for example, that, they want this one specific kind of a thing, when in reality there's kind of a wider range of solutions that we could look at. So that definitely has been, surprising to me, that people would, I don't want to say co-opt, but I'm definitely hearing this a little bit, in using Vision Zero as kind of justification for, maybe decisions or politics that are not necessarily completely data informed. But again, on the other side, I also think that it is clarifying, and it has really helped pull a lot of our stakeholders closer together and with that shared vision.
Thank you. Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left. So first of all, I want to thank our panelists for coming and looking through all those questions and kind of offering their stories. Now I have all their email addresses, and so if any of you on this call have, follow-up questions or, specific ideas or anything that you want to communicate to them, definitely feel free to send it to me, because I would love to keep this conversation going as we move forward throughout Milwaukee County. So just for our next steps moving forward, we had this webinar today, as we said at the beginning. This is one of, a set of webinars. The other topics have yet to be developed and flushed out, but definitely stay tuned in your inbox for those coming. But as far as key takeaways here for Vision Zero, we want to make sure that we keep thinking about the ways that we can change the conversation about policies, programs, and projects. And I think all of our speakers kind of mentioned this about kind of the power in the language of Vision Zero, or the power in the language of saying we are working towards eliminating serious injuries and deaths on our roadways. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where all the communities on this call go with changing that conversation. We also encourage you to identify opportunities to manage speed, whether these are in your existing programs and policies and projects or new ones. We look to you to understand equity and accessibility in your community. I've always been impressed with how the communities in Milwaukee County really understand their residents and their neighborhoods and listen. So I have complete faith that this number 3 will get done. And then looking at number 4 here, really thinking about centering safety across departments. I think we had some great examples from our panelists and from some folks in the comments about realizing that this isn't just a planning department thing, but it is also, your fire, your police, your public health, your parks and rec, that there's a lot of partners that need to be at the table here. Then number 5, thinking about reallocating or prioritizing funding, and that more funding isn't always necessary, but sometimes it's thinking about how to use the funding that you currently have. And one of our future webinars will be focusing in a little bit more on funding, so hopefully this conversation can continue then. And then number 6 is that start where you are. I think JM's example of, maybe saying right off the bat we're Vision Zero might be a little too much for some people within or outside your walls, but that doesn't mean that you can't start working towards the effort. So definitely, take stock of where you are, maybe find a champion or identify a champion, and then figure out kind of what your approach is from there. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody so much for coming to this webinar. I hope it was useful for you. I found it really interesting, but this is also kind of my thing, so of course I'm going to find it interesting. But I hope you all did as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff to close us out today.
All right, absolutely. Yeah, just want to echo that. Really just appreciate the expertise and the wisdom and the guidance that each of our panelists and our consultants were able to give. I'm really learning through this whole process. Been doing complete communities now over 2 years. And so, just being able to be at the table with each and every one of you, I'm really learning a lot and able to now apply that for the whole county. So yeah, let's keep working. We can achieve this. So really appreciate all of you. Please stay tuned for the next webinar. It's forthcoming. And in the meantime, we'll be in touch with you on your municipal safety action plans and all the other efforts that we're working on. So if there isn't anything else, have a great day. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, all. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.